Hi, I'm Jason. Today we'll be reviewing the Taylor Chicago 46 B-flat trumpet. Now this horn is made in the United Kingdom by Andy Taylor. I've known Andy for quite a few years. He does really nice work. And we're going to go through and measure some things on this horn, do a spectrum analysis of it with a few different mouthpiece setups. And overall, I'll give you my general impression of where this horn fits in terms of different genres and performance scenarios, and the overall build quality and options that are included. So, first thing we'll note are the heavier braces, which there's a sheep brace that looks like it was cut out and then soldered into the bell crook right here. Same with the tuning slide. This is a thicker bent tube for the tuning slide with another sheep brace soldered in. The top braces, again, are soldered in sheep braces, so none of these parts were machined. They're just straight sheep bracing. And then these two top braces are standard braces. The third slide has two little sheep braces on it here, and there's a little sheep brace here. Again, none of those are machined, so the fit and finish is different on every horn. Looks like the third slide screw stop. That clearly looks like it was made by Canstel in Anaheim, California, and then put on there. And the valve set appears to be a Bauerfeind valve set, which could help us date this horn. The engraving on the lead pipe was done by hand, and it's very fine work. Let's pull that up there close. And this is the mouthpiece that came with this horn, and it is hand stamped or machine stamped. Looks like some kind of a roll stamp. And I don't see a size on it, so I don't know the size. He's got nickel tubes over brass, which I prefer. Let's pull one of these pistons and check out the ports. So these are the ports. This is what they look like. They are probably a little shorter throw, and they have some bumps in them, meaning there's probably added impedance in these ports, which could change the feel of each note. He also has Amato water keys. What else do we have to point out on that section of the horn? The mouthpiece receiver and the mouthpiece are the same diameter. I'm going to measure those so we know what they are. So 747 on the receiver to the lead pipe and 753 on the mouthpiece. Pretty close fit, almost 3/4 of an inch. Oh yes, and we have larger round finger rings on this horn, and then heavy finger buttons, and the stock Bauerfeind heavy bottom caps. The bell is larger, it's got much more volume in it, and a bigger diameter, and that's really what's going to help us produce a bigger, warmer tone that the 46 is known for. I just weighed this horn, and it weighed over 4 pounds with the mouthpiece, and I think it was 311 ounces or 3 pounds 12 ounces, somewhere in there, without the mouthpiece. So it is quite a heavy horn. In comparison to, say, one of our Summits over here, those can be a little bit lighter. So these typically fall into the 3 pounds to 3 pound 8 ounces if you put everything on it. So a VPS Summit is lighter than a Taylor. I should say not lighter than a Taylor, lighter than this Taylor. Because Taylor makes lighter weight horns too. So he offers heavy stuff all the way to lighter stuff. And then the next thing we want to do is measure the bore size, the venturi, and the gap. Those pieces of information are going to tell us a lot. So we're going to start with the bore size. I'm going to pull the second slide and the tuning slide. So there's the second, and here's the tuning slide. And this tuning slide is very loose. Actually, when I picked it up, when I first got the horn a few days ago, I literally picked the horn up like this, tuning slide fell on the floor. Luckily, I wasn't on the machine shop floor, or it would have dented. But that is extremely loose. I'm not sure why. It doesn't look like it was overlapped or anything. So personally, I think you'd have to use thick grease or have that expanded. So we're going to measure these with a gauge pin. Now I've just measured all the tubes with gauge pins, and this one comes out to be a 459. So it looks like both the top and the bottom of the tuning slide and the second slide are all 459. And I'll get that up close. There it is, 459. So it calls it the 46. I always thought that was the bore size. Maybe it is, but I can't get a 460 pin to fit in the tube. So I think it really is a 459. Next, we want to measure the venturi of the receiver or of the lead pipe. So we do that with a venturi measurement tool, which I have right here. This tool has bands, each one a different diameter, and we can color them with a Sharpie marker and then just insert it into the lead pipe and give it a little twist. And when you do that, you will wear some of those bands. And I'm going to pull it out and see what it says. And I don't see the mark, so I'm going to color it up again. This is the venturi measurement tool, which we make here at Harrelson Trumpets. Each one of these bands is a different diameter. And I've colored them black on one side with a Sharpie marker. I'm going to insert them, and I'm just going to give it a twist where it hits the lead pipe, pull it out, and see which one of those bands wore off. Let's get it up close. So it wore off right there in the middle, just on the edge, right there. So let's see which band that is. You can look in our instruction book to see which band that is, or you can just measure it with a caliper, which is what I'm going to do. And it's right on the front edge of that band, 355. So the venturi on this Taylor is 355 thousandths, which is about 10 or 12 thousandths bigger than a Yamaha Xeno or a Bach Stradivarius. It's very large. And that size venturi could create some serious challenges for a lot of players. Because unless you're used to playing a large throat and a large backbore on your mouthpiece, it could be that you're not going to find the slots and you may have reduced flexibility until you can work up to this size venturi. So 355 is very large. Now we're going to measure the mouthpiece gap, and today I'm going to use calipers. This mouthpiece fits into the receiver very tight. So for me to do a measurement on this horn in particular, I'm going to have to do a few measurements. First is I'm going to measure the gap right here, which is 47 thousandths. So 47 thousandths space between the mouthpiece, shoulder, and the receiver. The next, I'm going to have to measure the distance from the end of the receiver to the lead pipe. So I let that bottom out, and I get the number 1187. So I have 1187, and the mouthpiece space was 47. I'm going to write these down. Next, I'm going to measure the distance from the end of the shank to the shoulder of the mouthpiece. I wouldn't measure mouthpieces this way, but this one fits so tight and there's no other way to mark it. That comes out to 1088. Now here we have the numbers. 1187, which is the depth from the end of the receiver to the lead pipe. 1088 is subtracted. That is the length of the mouthpiece from the shank to the shoulder. Then we have to add 047 because it stands out that much further from the receiver. What's the number we get? 146 is our gap. Now 146 is an interesting number because when you put a Taylor mouthpiece into a Taylor horn, it seems like it's almost seamless. And most people would just guess that this little bit would represent the gap inside here. But unless you do the math, you will not know the true gap inside the receiver. And I've tested several different Taylor mouthpieces over the years, and they're not consistent, so they produce different amounts of gap. I've seen some that are as low as 80 and others that are bigger than 200. So this one is producing, what was that number? 146. That's, in my opinion, way too much gap. It's going to create really hard slots, not enough flexibility. I have worked on a lot of Taylor trumpets over the years where I simply just put our shim kit in there and we reduced the gap by putting in our shims. And this is a brochure for the shim kit if you haven't seen that. It's a very simple system. And I like to plug that product in this video because I've seen so many tailors come through the shop that played much easier and were more flexible once you put the right size shim inside the receiver. A very simple, clean solution that takes your playing to the next level on a Taylor trumpet. So now we have the gap on this mouthpiece. I'm going to measure the gap on a Bach mouthpiece and see what we get. This time I'm going to use a little different method. Now I have my line. I'm going to measure it with the caliper, and that comes out to be 887. Okay, so that's my number. At this point, I'm going to zero out my caliper. Now I'm just going to plunge my caliper into the receiver, stop at the tail, and now my gap comes out to be 304. So literally 304 thousandths gap with a Bach mouthpiece. In my opinion, that is far too much. 147 was too much. 304 is almost double that. You're going to have some serious issues playing this horn with those mouthpieces. So it looks like this Taylor trumpet needs a smaller shank or a longer shank mouthpiece to fit with less gap. Last, I'm going to measure the gap with my own personal 5mm modular mouthpiece. Now you can see again there isn't enough room to measure. So on my mouthpiece, I'm going to pull the nut off and then put it back in. I'm going to mark it and then use the same method I did before. And I just finished the measurements on a 5mm modular mouthpiece. The gap comes out to be 391. That is insane. It's more than 3/8 of an inch, meaning on my mouthpiece, I am most likely going to experience some really serious slotting issues on this horn. What I'm going to do to prevent that is put in one of my longer back bores to get this number down to under 100. So I'm going to put a back bore, which is this piece right here, that's 300 longer, so that I do not experience the issues I would experience on these other mouthpieces. It turns out that we don't even have a 300 back bore because that's so uncommon that we ran out. So I have a plus 200, and I'll hold these up to the camera so you can see they are different. So the one on the left is 200 thousandths larger. And that will bring my gap down to a smaller number, but it's not under 100, which is what I'd like to see. So we're going to put this in, and then we'll do a spectrum analysis on my mouthpiece. So with my mouthpiece in there, it now is reaching 200 thousandths closer to the lead pipe. I believe the gap is still somewhere around 190 something. So I'm going to start up the spectrum analyzer and record this. Let's get a new file. Record. That's my low C. That's my C above it in the staff. And notice on that C, we have some different amplitudes on the partials. So you can see we have spikes on definitely the second partial. And there we had a spike on the first partial. Let's go back and play those. Let's go back here. I'm going to play it. They're pretty even overall on the low C. Now we have less on the first and more on the second. Okay, now next one. I was bending the pitch just to test it. And here we go to the high C. And I'm going to pause that one so we can look at it. Fundamental, that's our first partial, which is an octave, a fifth, an octave. And you can see there's not a lot of color in the upper register on this horn. If I were measuring a horn with a different bell and lead pipe, you'd have lots of sparkle and color up here. This horn has very little. It's almost a pure tone. So we have the fundamental, the octave, the fifth, the next octave, and then a third, a fifth, and seventh. We don't even have the other octave. So it's a fairly unusual looking spectrum analysis, and I attribute that to the fact that the horn really doesn't have a lot of resonance in the bell. And that is, I think, an intentional part of the design of this Taylor Chicago 46. So where would that fit in the terms of genres? Well, it might not fit into a concert band setting or big band unless you're playing the solo chair, but it would fit into a situation where you're doing small combo work, either jazz or with strings, something like that. It might blend in very nice. Although I'd still like to see some more sparkle up here. And we're going to go back one note, so the C in the staff. And look at that as well. Let's see, it's right here. Doesn't want to give it to me. There it is. And again, you can see that the first partial has a spike, the second less, the third more, and then it kind of tapers off. I'd like to see this a little higher to have some vibrancy. So for this horn, I would purely use it for jazz combo. Let's try it with another mouthpiece. Let's use the original Taylor, which again I think gave us a gap of 146. So we're going to play that one and record it. Go to New File, Record. And we'll go back and analyze those very quickly. So here's our low C, and it's fairly even. We have some spikes. So up high, we have a couple spikes. There is some color there. Overall, it's pretty even. And then it tapers off in the color zone. I like to call the upper partials really the colorful part. Here's the C in the staff. Again, it's fairly even. Got a little dip and some more color there. And then on the high C, using the Taylor mouthpiece, again, not a lot of sparkle. So we've got the fundamental, the octave, the fifth, the octave, third, fifth. Now we finally get, so that's the seventh, dominant seventh. Here we finally get the octave, just a tiny bit of it. So even with the Taylor mouthpiece designed for it, we have too much gap, way too much, like 100 too much. And then we also have a fairly dead looking spectrum analysis. That can be a really good thing, especially if you're using it for something like jazz combo, or even just purely solo trumpet without any other brass. So this horn definitely has its advantages, and it has its place. Now let's test it with the mouthpiece, and we'll slide up and down the scale and do some lip slurs. I'll turn the analysis on at the same time so you can check that out. In the upper register, I have a very hard time moving from slot to slot. It's locked in, so too much gap, which really equates to too much impedance. And you can see in the spectrum analysis, there's almost no color there. But at the lower notes, there's some vibrancy. So this was our review of a Taylor Chicago 46. My overall impressions are that this is a great horn for solo or small jazz combo, and I would highly recommend changing a few things on the horn. The first being the mouthpiece gap. You would want to put some shims in here and correct that. You may even want a different mouthpiece if you need sparkle for other situations. Other things that you would consider doing to this horn, Amada water keys do tend to stick over time, so you want to either clean them very often or just change them out for something that doesn't stick so easily. And overall, I think this is a very fine horn, the Taylor Chicago 46.